Welcome back to the PolitBureau. So joining us from our Cape Town studio is DA Manager Jonathan Moakes and brand expert Andy Rice. We're talking about the DA's recently released attack advert, where it essentially points out the failures of the ANC government instead of touting its record in government. We're hopefully going to be able to play that attack advert for you in a moment or so. But let's maybe start out with Mr. Moakes down in Cape Town. Jonathan, if you can hear me, the obvious question here is the DA runs 3 metros. It runs 1 province. Why exactly are you not telling South Africans about what you've done in the past 3 years in Johannesburg, Tshwane and Cape Town, as well as the last 5 years and more in the Western Cape, instead of telling us what the ANC hasn't done?
Hi, good morning, Nicholas. Thanks very much for having me. I think you can't judge an election campaign on one attack advert. We are indeed communicating in volume across the country how the DA gets things done where it is in government, the great change that we have made in the past 10 years in the Western Cape, the great change we've made where we govern metros, and we've also been very, very clear in terms of our communication of building one South Africa for all, founded on an agenda for change that fights corruption, puts a job in every home, creates an honest and professional police service, secures our borders and speeds up the delivery of basic services.
Mr. Moakes, we'll come back down to Cape Town with you in a moment. We're going to bring in Andy Rice in a moment. But let's play this DA attack advert, arguably the most aggressive in electoral history in South Africa.
1994 was a great moment in our country's history. We were united. We had hope. We all shared the same dream of one South Africa for all. That dream has been hijacked, corrupted and sold out by the power-hungry and corrupt. They divide us with anger and hate. Corruption is killing our country. Those who have betrayed the struggle are the ones in power who have made themselves rich while the poor go hungry. This is not what we were promised. More empty promises, more unemployment. For 25 years, we have waited. We are moving backwards.
Well, Andy Rice, brand expert, brave advert, very, very well put together. You can't fault the DA on that. But is this the right message for a party that is in power now?
Well, I think you have to acknowledge, first of all, that it was a courageous decision to produce that kind of advertising. It's not what we see here at all, overseas perhaps. But I love a lot of the imagery, and I think it's a very disruptive campaign, which is something that most advertising attempts to achieve. Having said that, when one looks at the message, I find it rather predictable. You've basically got 2 components. You've got it starts off with the optimism from '94 looking forward, and then obviously it takes the view of where we are today. But if you say that strategy is ultimately about getting from point A to point B, you have to define both. This is still stuck in point A, where we are now, what's happened, what's wrong. And it talks about change but gives no concrete evidence for change. And that, I think, is the weakness of almost every political campaign in this election.
Let's bring you back in, Jonathan Moakes, down in Cape Town. Who exactly took this decision? Who decided that it was a better idea to attack the ANC instead of tout your record? Because you say that you have been touting your record in government, but the fact of the matter is that that advert is pinned to the top of your Twitter feed and has been receiving a lot of airtime. You're on one of the premier political magazine programs this Sunday talking about exactly that. This is what you wanted.
Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. I mean, obviously, we're in a phase of our campaign where we did decide to punt this advert, and it has generated conversation quite correctly because the advert points out to the urgency of South Africa's situation and the need to bring change. I think you cut off with still 30 seconds to go about the need for change. But I think the fact of the matter is an advert is not the whole strategy and execution of an election campaign. Before this advert, there has been an advert advert highlighting our offer of change that builds one South Africa for all, another advert that speaks directly to our offer about creating fair access to jobs, and there will be other adverts coming out, not to mention the public election broadcast. Also, TV advertising is but one aspect of an election campaign.
But Jonathan, let me ask you here.
By significant direct voter contact on the ground.
Apologies to butt in there, but let me ask you and drill down. Where's the nitty-gritty? Where's the DA saying we have managed to create so many jobs in the past 3 years in the 3 metros that we govern? Where is the DA saying that you've improved public infrastructure in Cape Town to a point in your role as Western Cape government leader? Where is the DA talking about their record in numbers?
Yeah, well, I think you're quite correct on infrastructure and jobs. I mean, almost half of the jobs created in South Africa over the last year have been created in DA governments. I can certainly send you, Nicholas, and ENCA a huge amount of election material, leaflets. Obviously,
you don't need to get the ENCA and myself to
manifesto.
vote for you. Sorry,
I certainly don't, but we are communicating that out, yeah.
All right, so I'll give you one final word there, Jonathan, but maybe a word from you here, Andy. Is this a possibility that it could backfire in any way, shape or form?
Obviously, aggressive stuff like this can backfire, but I think that the most important thing is to understand what brands need to do, and this is political brand advertising. Brands are a mixture of the heart and the head, and if you don't get ticks in both boxes, so in other words, a piece of communication that makes you feel great but also resonates in your own brain and your expectations, then it's not going to work as well as it could. I think you could argue, for example, that the EFF is principally heart and not much head, because it's all about the emotion of what they're offering. And I think that the DA has the opportunity to get in there to be the brand that says, not only am I going to make you feel good about what we're offering, but I'm going to convince you rationally that we've got that message there as well.
All right, Jonathan, final word from you down in Cape Town then. When are we going to see this message from the DA? I mean, it's coming down to 2 weeks before elections. Have you left yourself enough time to talk about what you're going to do, make people feel good about your party, as Andy Rice is suggesting?
Yeah, Nicholas, I mean, we have been talking what we're going to do and what we have done. And over the final 2 weeks, I think given the urgency of the situation South Africa faces, we're going to communicate that we'll bring change that builds one South Africa for all, puts a job in every home, and you're going to see a lot of communication about those elements.
All right, a final word from you then, Andy. The DA we're talking about today, but briefly touch on the ANC and the EFF. Maybe start with Cyril Ramaphosa's party. Do you think that they have excelled or failed in their election message?
I think their message to date has been derivative and bland and undifferentiated. I think, however, they have the real opportunity, because change is what all the parties are talking about, and change is a naturally uncomfortable process for us to go through. We don't like it in any sphere. And yet they have the opportunity to change from within, which I think is rather more acceptable and understanding than to say I'm coming from left field like the EFF and can ask people to make a complete turnaround of their opinions. I think that the opportunity to say you can still support the legacy and the heritage while this reform happens from within. I think that's their opportunity. They haven't touched it yet. The DA, I think, is as I've said, to be commended for this kind of communication, but I think it needs to go further. It needs to say, on top of this problem that we're addressing, here are our solutions. And the EFF, I think, is all heart. I think it's passionate. It's got an understanding of their messaging, but I just feel that they're lacking, until you get into their manifesto, any kind of rational argument to support their claims.
Isn't it well surmised by Our Land, Our Jobs Now, that catchphrase from the election posters that we've seen next to Julius Malema's face? Absolutely.
I think they've hit the right buttons. But how? You know, the ANC has been saying the same thing for the last 25 years and really have not been able to deliver.
Andy Rice, brand expert, thank you so much for joining us on PolitBureau this Easter Sunday. Coming up next, Spinners and Spanners. It's Easter, but our politicians haven't been hiding or searching for Easter eggs. Nope, they're on the hunt for votes and asking for God's help.